Hi again. I mentioned that I was at Brand Center before I was at 360i. When I was there, I wrote a blog post, excuse me, that was reblogged a number of times called "What the Heck is a Creative Technologist?" And it was pretty good. In it, actually it was the first thing that came back on Google for a long time. I was really proud of that when you typed in "What is a creative technologist?" I posited that there are sort of two general directions that creative technologists seem to come from. Drew Ungarsky, who is over there, typifies one of them, which is a developer who is finding creativity in developing and is fluent in both being creative and being strategic. And that's a really interesting way of defining a creative technologist. Drew is CEO and Executive Creative Director of Grow. Website is thisisgrow.com. Great digital agency with clients like Google. You'll hear more about HBO, Burberry, FedEx, a bunch of other really great ones. And they've done some really great creative technology kind of work that is very creative and very strategic, but really embraces technology at the core. And that's often not the case with a lot of agencies, so that's really great to see. Won some Cannes Lions, it's all the normal stuff that great agencies do. He's also hooked up with this guy, Ben Melvin. Ben, I met when he was at BBH and was co-founder of BBH Labs. A lot of us owe our careers as creative technologists to what you did by actually having creative technology as an expertise within a traditional ad agency. BBH was always known for doing brilliant creative in print and television because Labs was there, sort of infused this technology push towards everything. And then expanded from there to be executive director of innovation there, moved on to Google, part of the creative lab at Google. It says here, a team of misfits whose mission is to remind the world what it is they love about Google. All those really cool ads that we saw that everybody, when Chrome was coming out, came out of there in BBH. And it was just some brilliant, brilliant work. Now leads creative partnerships team at Google, a group whose goal is to invent the future of marketing. Small. Also has a PhD in social psychology, likes cats, military history, and polar exploration. Wears stripes a lot. These guys are going to talk about data-driven storytelling. It's going to be really interesting stuff. So please welcome Ben and Drew.
Thank you, Mark. Okay. So we have a really fussy opening section, which is difficult because I can't see it on my screen. I'm going to have to refresh. And we'll explain why in a second.
Today. As in today. As in right now.
1:57 p.m.
It's a pretty exciting time to be doing what we're all doing. Because people like this, and people like that, are now sitting together with folks like this. And the work they're making isn't like the ads we're used to. It's stuff like this, these, and whatever this is. It's connecting the real world to the web, telling more personal stories with data, and using this stuff to make our lives easier and more fun. And wow, robots. Yeah, it's a pretty exciting time.
1:58 p.m.
And imagine what we could make next. Welcome to art, copy, and code.
My mouse. So the reason, sorry, it's difficult with two screens when one screen is shown. Here we go. Let's try this. Okay. So we're going to explain why we showed that film shortly. So firstly, thank you to Mark, and thank you to Nancy and to Chick and to the 4A's for putting this on, firstly, but also for inviting us along to speak today. So we're super grateful to be here. So Mark's introduced us. We're going to skip the introductions and go straight to that film, which is a film powered by data. And that film is never the same twice, which I still can't really quite understand, which is why it's rendered out of the browser. It never works, actually. So today's one of the first times I've ever seen it actually work. So usually it is the same because we have to play the kind of video version. Oh, sorry, I'm wandering around. So it's real-time content, it's location-based content. So you saw some stuff around the weather in this area. You saw stories from blogs from today's news that were kind of sucked in, news feeds. Actually, it's made up of 32 segments in around 60 seconds. So 32 different bits of film are kind of dragged from different kind of information sources together. And we made this around 18 months ago as a bit of kind of an internal test / promo piece. And we're still intrigued by it because we haven't seen many things like it yet, and we think there's probably a role for that kind of stuff. Anyway, we're going to come back to that. But the main point we wanted to make with that film is really to kind of set up what we're going to talk about today, which is how brands can start using data more in the way that they communicate and engage their users, their fans, their customers. And data not just in terms of kind of insights that go at the front end of projects and feed what projects are, and not even just at the end of projects, which is where data tends to be in terms of effectiveness and metrics and words like that, but data in the very core of a project that helps you decide what to serve someone, when, how, and why. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So my team, as Mark says, we have this kind of slightly ludicrous mission of kind of helping to reinvent how marketing works and working with technology and working with brands, iconic brands, and with their agencies to try and do that. So that's what we try and do. Well, obviously with the kind of overarching emphasis of trying to accelerate change in the industry more broadly towards kind of digital stuff, which is what we are about at Google. And the way we do that, and this is a kind of old, in a way, an old slide from the Creative Lab that still really works for us today, which is we start with people. And we start with what they need, we start with how they need it, and we start with what they're not getting, and we start with why they're not getting it and what they want from what they're not getting. So really understanding psychology. And we think that starting with people is a really good place to start because they're usually smarter than us. They're usually doing things that are more advanced than we can possibly do at our kind of scale and with our kind of constraints. And they're usually ahead of brands too, and they're usually ahead of agencies. So starting with people, starting with users, and connecting them with the magic that's in our products somehow, whether it's our products or just digital stuff generally, we think is a good kind of ecosystem and works well for us. So talking of people and talking of like what they're doing, this is the starting point for what we want to talk to you about today, which is something to do with real time. And we had been kind of getting into this idea of real time and exploring what real time means to marketers, and it's a massively overused buzz term in the industry, of course. But we were trying to think about like what would be really interesting to kind of push and pioneer in this space versus just do stunts, right? So kind of what would a system look like that could be a real-time system? And we know that, 88% of our starting point would be 88% of marketers think that real-time is important to their marketing plans. And on the other side, the user side, 84% of people who are smartphone and tablet owners watch TV with some kind of second screen device in their hands, right? So that marketers want it, real people are doing it. So what can we do to kind of like bring those two together in some way? So this is our starting point. There are then the inevitable couple of slides, which apologies for the smallness, but I'll explain a bit because of course we started with some data, so we had some stats, and now we had some graphs. As we started to dig into this, we got fascinated by this. This is indexed search query volume for the 2014 Super Bowl, so almost a year ago, for the automotive vertical. For the US only, right? So this shows 13 different brands across 16 different TV ads. Each of those TV ads you can see as a spike, and the time goes on the bottom. So I think it's all Pacific time. Now, what's clear to us here is that people are searching in direct response to something that's happening on TV. In this case, it's a piece of advertising, but gigantic spikes that are happening instantly. And this means, clearly people have something in their hand which they're using to conduct some kind of search, which is great news for brands. It's great news for people who are, have digital platforms, hopefully as well. But if you look at this build, which is that's blown up, if that's what the magnifying glass means, you can see that actually the time one, whether you're a brand or someone else, has to kind of be relevant to that search, to that searcher, to that behavior, to that need, is actually minutes, not hours, right? So that's kind of 6 or 7 minutes max, and you can see this kind of really interesting kind of half-life decay curve of relevance. So if you're going to be in that moment in any way relevant to that person watching that program, whether it's a live event at sports or music or reality TV or whatever it might be, you have to be quick, right? So that's one of our starting points. This window of relevance is very, very narrow. this next slide, last slide of graphs, and then we can look at some other fun stuff. This next slide is from the World Cup from last summer. So Super Bowl, first data point, summer, second data point. This is Germany against Argentina. And, you know, because we know lots and lots of this is taking place on phones and tablets, we wanted to kind of explore just what the difference was between desktop and tablet and phone. And this really clearly, I think, shows, you know, we looked at data that went further back, and we had more time to show that, showing the progression of this movement towards mobile, towards second screen. Yellow mobile queries, blue are desktop queries. And I think two things in particular are clear: that people reach for their phones and tablets when something noteworthy or exciting happens. They want to be part of that conversation. They want to comment on it, share, and it's that kind of like, you know, virtual kind of digital water cooler type moment that we all know and love and partake in. The second point, so apart from the first thing is like you reach for your phone, is that mobile is already dominant, like by a long way, and it's clearly going to become more dominant, mobile and tablet. And so this is another data point that kind of led to this project, which Drew and I are going to talk about. Enough data, which brings us to Madden. So, and our partnership with EA Sports. So I recently gave a similar presentation to this to 900 Germans in Berlin in an aircraft hangar. It's really difficult because no one knew what Madden was or had ever had any real affection for NFL. And I spent like 10 minutes kind of explaining to people. Anyway, so hopefully, let's do a quick show of hands. Hands up if you've ever played Madden, ever in your life. Oh my God. Okay. Hands up if you've played in the last 12 months. Okay. So that's because we're a slightly aging audience. So some of us. So this is the challenge that, you know, that we started talking to EA about, which is how can they regain relevance in a world where, you know, Grand Theft Auto and Call of Duty and there's kind of a whole new range of much more kind of exciting games have taken over, and the younger generation are growing up with those games, not with Madden. So how can they kind of re-inspire people to kind of find the magic that's in Madden, which has obviously come on, you know, in leaps and bounds during those 15 iterations. So the brief for them was really clear. How do we grow love and affection and, you know, and kind of usage, fandom for Madden by tapping into people's just like massive love for football in this country, which is still a mystery to me, but I've learned lots about it since. So this was really a really important moment for us. So this is something we noticed well before EA came to us last year, but as we were kind of thinking about this real-time thing, which is like, you know, there's a lot of kind of chat about memes internally at Google, and we kind of get fascinated about things that happen on the web and things that blow up and why. And when we started working with Heat, who are EA's creative agency based in San Francisco, and with Drew and his guys, we started to look at how real people watch sports, right? Not kind of us, but real people out in the kind of real country, part of the middle bit. And we, you know, this is the kind of thing that, you know, this is Peyton Manning, who I now know his name, 2014 Super Bowl. You guys will all know this moment, right? Because everyone probably saw a version of this in their Facebook stream or their Twitter feed or on Tumblr or something. This is the moment where, you know, he's having a really crappy game, and the kind of super shows out there, and he's making a call. And within seconds, you've got this. Right, and this is just a kind of snapshot. Like, huge amount of interest, people turning to their second screens, people using their creativity, their points of view to comment, to post, to share. And, you know, this was really fascinating to us. It's like, you know, if you get this right, you can ride a wave and be part of a conversation in a really big way that's additive to the game, not diversionary. Right, so it's a companion, not a competitor. And this is really interesting to us. This is part of the experience of these people. And then, sorry, I lied. There's one more chart. There's one more graph, which is a really interesting one, I think, anyway, which is this is index search query volume for the US, showing interest in GIFs. So just searches for GIFs or GIFs. And, you know, this is kind of like, wow, let's think about like what happened with Peyton Manning. Is this a one-off? Is it just a kind of, you know, actually no, you can't see the scale, but it's kind of index, so you can generally get the kind of idea that it's going up. Something's interesting going on here, whether like streams are now better able to cope with GIFs, whether that, you know, the things like Giphy enable people to find GIFs more easily, but there's a kind of ecosystem around GIFs that seems interesting. So all these kind of ingredients were kind of coming together in our heads, in the heads of Drew and his team, in the heads of Heat and the guys at their end and at EA. And this is where we got to, and this is kind of, it's a slightly smartened version, but this is basically the creative idea. This is the simplest creative idea you've ever seen in your life. This is basically the idea that we came up with, that we kind of went, this is the idea. This is it. So we'll take this brilliantly rich, as good as life, real life type rendering of the game that's now available in the Madden experience. We'll take slices of that game, literally kind of frames. We'll put them with certain players, certain plays, certain teams. We'll allow people to put commentary over the top and serve them in pretty much in real time as a companion to what's happening in the game. And we'll call it, we made that by our own kind of silly name, we called it the Madden GIF Rater. And we can think of what else to call it. So this was the starting point. This is way back in probably June. So actually way back, it wasn't that way back, but it was way back. It felt way back. And so we kind of thought, this is it, right? This could be a really great way of providing a scalable way for anyone to get involved and to kind of banter in that kind of like brilliant rivalry way that we need. The creative agency Heat come up with this idea based around rivalries, which TV ad, which you may have seen for Madden, is all about like two guys just having this gigantic argument about who's kind of the biggest douche. But sorry, that's my summary. But this is kind of doing, and that allows you to do that. So this is what the experience ended up looking like. So this is a kind of little video, which I hope works. Office. So Drew will tell you about the actual magic.
Yeah, good. So hi, I'm Drew. GIF Rater is actually our fourth art copy and code project, and before that we did Burberry Kisses and Volkswagen Smile Drive and Nike Phenomenal Shot. And as Ben said, we're looking at this project and we're talking about real time, and we're seeing all these trends that to us look incredibly exciting, and yet also, admittedly as a creative or creative technologist, I'm sort of thinking, man, do we want to make GIFs? Do we? That's a dangerous area to be in. You can be really corny very fast, and so our challenge was, how do we figure out what are the moments that actually matter? Like, where do we actually have a place in this conversation, and where can we add value to this conversation? And then once we do, what are we going to say that is unique and makes sense for a brand to be there, and is creating something of, again, real value that people will care about? So we started actually, football is an interesting game because it's for as unpredictable as it is. I can say I'm a Steelers fan. Hold the applause in the New England room. Last week they lost to a team in the Jets that were on an 8 game losing streak. So all things considered, an unpredictable game. But if you look at it statistically, we were able to find that there's some really serious trends that we can pay attention to and key into. So we looked at the 2013 season data and ran that across every game that was played, all of the player stats, and sort of analyzed those, essentially playing back those games. And found that there were real moments that we could key into, and we knew exactly if we wanted to be about this much conversation in a game. Say we wanted to be able to publish 10 memes in a game. What were those moments that were going to matter? How often does a player actually have more than one sack in a game? How often does a quarterback throw for 300 yards in a game? And those sorts of things. And we're able to really sort of reliably predict those things and build an engine on top of that. And the other thing we wanted to do was, again, say, okay, well, now if we know those moments, and we've got this unique thing in Madden to talk about that with, and we know we've got some really talented copywriters who can do this, and we're talking about this idea of like letting fans do this thing. But what is it creatively that we can do with this thing that's again going to create a really unique voice, and something that frankly fans wouldn't have been able to do without Madden being part of that conversation? So this was the treatment that we came up with. And in fact, as Ben said early on, as early as probably June, we did a quick prototype of this thing. We literally just took the trailer of the game and rotoscoped out the players and put the type in between. But what we came in and said was, we can do that at scale. We can do that for hundreds of plays across all the different players in the teams because it's a video game. We couldn't have done that with real footage, else we would have had to hire a massive team of editors who were all rotoscoping these things and sort of. And by the way, the TV footage wasn't going to be nearly as compelling. With the video game, we could control the camera angle. We could do exactly what we wanted to do with this thing. And the video game looked every bit as compelling, and in some cases more compelling than the real game does. So you can see we were able to separate out the different layers, had full camera control. It was a really great and simple process. We had interns playing the video game, and that would render out layers of content that we wanted. And an art director we paid people to play the video games all day long in our studio. And then an art director could come in and say, let's do something more interesting there and recapture it, change the camera angle. And then, of course, the copywriters knew exactly what it was that they were writing to, and we could sort of build this arsenal. The other interesting thing we did was we built out templatized copywriting. So we told the copywriters, here's the types of events that you're going to be speaking to, but we'll put in these placeholders and say, you're speaking to an individual stat that happened. So you can talk about the specific player who just made this play. You can talk certainly about the team. You can talk about the position. You can talk about the actual statistic that player just generated. He just ran for a 52-yard gain, and so we can instantly publish a GIF that uses that exact line referring to the 52-yard gain he just had. And of course, the other thing we can do, and we're of course appealing to the internet here, is we can add fire and fireworks and American flags and other things that the internet really enjoys. So we were able to do that really at scale, and though the idea was sort of hashed in May-June timeframe, it was really a 2-month build. That we were able to pull together because, this was a really scalable process. We captured, for 32 teams, we basically made 5 to 10 captures across each of those teams, depending on what players they had and whether they were likely to generate those different scenarios that we had. Created some of those different backgrounds. And then we asked the copywriters, here are those positions. And those plays that are going to happen. And they wrote about 600 different lines. Again, a bunch of them templatized so that they can really become kind of infinite. And if you do the math on those things, 32 teams and the 10 different players and the 10 different backgrounds and the 600 or so different lines, what you'll see is we end up with a pool of hundreds of thousands, probably close to 1 million different pieces of creative that we can choose at any given time. And those can always be essentially infinitely customizable because of the copywriting. So we know we now have content that is hugely, hugely relevant to the moment that something has happened. And by looking at a simple live data feed, we can look at the same logic we looked at to analyze the NFL games themselves and pick the right creative and pick the right copy to show and be relevant to that very moment. Even as you think about an NFL game happening, there's something like a 15, 20-second delay on the thing. Our live feed is actually faster than that. So we were always instant with the game. The second you saw it on the TV, we had the GIF for the exact thing that you just saw. So really remarkable. But of course, I think equally remarkable about this is that we were able to publish the exact same content to ads running at the same time. So we had 32 different creative units, just sort of template units that were running, one for each team, and we could always just plug in the latest content that was relevant to the particular game that was happening, again, instantly. So as you were, go back to Ben's charts, and you could see people are jumping on the internet to look for that specific thing that's just happened. They're searching around that moment. We have ads that are referring to the exact same thing that you just saw, using graphics of the player and a line that's funnier than anything you're seeing, on the publisher themselves. And in fact, usually ahead of the publishers themselves. So the publishers have content in there, even if they have game recaps, our ads were typically ahead of those as well.
Do you want to mention just
Yeah.
what that middle thing is, just the NFL feed? Because that's quite.
Oh yes, I'm sorry. So we were able to just take those exact same memes that we were creating and put a live feed of the score and the game time on top of that. So again, the games or the ads that are running are truly reflecting the very live action going on in the game, and as you're looking at that thing that it's instantly relevant to the game that you're watching. Yeah, Good. So as I mentioned, 32 teams, 32 ad templates running. This has been running now for the 8 or 9 weeks of the NFL season here, and essentially the thing is on autopilot. We have something that's running and generating for every single game all the time. We've given those exact same tools that the engine uses. We have them available that can be used in a war room scenario, and from time to time they are, but we're largely relying on this kind of auto-generated content. And thus far, we've generated over 1,250 hyper specific real-time pieces of content that spoke to a certain event in the game. Something I thought that was really awesome as we were testing this thing. We ran it on the preseason games, and I remember seeing one of the games came up, and we saw the same meme published twice, and so instantly we sort of filed a bug ticket and say something's wrong here. And the developers came back and they said, actually, no, what's happening is our system is running, and those guys over there are also testing the live war room, and the humans picked the exact same copy and wrote the exact same line that our system did. So it really told us we were doing the right thing with the data and the sorts of things that we had to choose from. So if we're going to make those same tools available to people in a war room, we definitely think we should make those things available to everybody else. In fact, we can be sort of moderately creative, and we think everyone else was going to be hugely creative with it, and they certainly proved us right. And of course, this is where I think the campaign has gotten most exciting. And for those of you who've seen it, generated an absolute sort of ton of traffic, and people were sort of generating these things massively, particularly throughout the opening of the season. And it looks like this. And again, thinking back to what Ben was talking about, like that moment, you have less than minutes to get on and be relevant to something that's going on. So we have the content that's referring to the thing that just happened on TV. But of course, you're smarter and funnier than we are, and you have something specific you want to comment on. In about 30 seconds, you can generate the exact same high quality content that we could. And all through this very simple web interface was super nice. I thought there were some smart things going on technically here for those of you in the room who are inclined that way. They're using Canvas on the front end and also on the back end, so that whatever is rendered on the front end, so the user can be manually typing that thing in, the server will render the exact same thing because it's running the exact same code. So you're able to instantly write in this thing and hit generate. 3-4 seconds later, the server comes back with the exact same content, ready to go, savable on a mobile device. So we can't generate all this stuff in HTML. We need you to have an actual shareable GIF that you could throw into a text or into a chat, and it was all ready to go. And of course, with UGC comes some level of risk, and kind of a risky content in general. And for that, it's really just about mitigating that risk. I think you'd sort of see coming from this exactly what you'd expect. You'd see loads and loads of really great content, and you'd see a couple of people trying to be jerks. And what do you do about the jerks? And it was simple as creating really strong filtering rules to catch the vast majority of it. We had a database of more dirty words than I have ever seen in my life. You need a shower after you look at this thing. And the database, actually, importantly, is running just in a Google spreadsheet. So anybody can get into that spreadsheet at any time. They see something happen in a GIF, or they see something happen in the news and say, we don't want this to become a platform for that thing. Drop a line into that spreadsheet, and it will no longer be part of the experience. And so I'd say, this filtering takes care of 98% of the challenge, and then, moderation for the last % or two. And you'll see that the result has been quite successful.
The one thing I'd add to that last slide is, they're not here, but the people from EA deserve massive props, right? Because it's very easy to get super nervous when this kicks off and you see the first few of these go through, and the CEO's watching, and you get kind of like, but they stuck with it, and they were kind of, they worked with our team to figure out ways of improving the filtering, speeding up the filtering, being clever about what was being filtered. So, all of this doesn't happen without like awesome clients who can push things through and stay true to the vision when it gets rocky. Okay, so obviously, as Drew's kind of hinted, the best thing about these kind of projects is when people do things with the thing you've made that you don't think about, or you didn't intend, or and some of them are great, and some of them are not so great. Some of them, these are great, or great-ish. And I mean, real life and the way real people are just more interesting than us, right? So what people do with these things, whether it's the thing on the left, which is just very funny, or using kind of what's not here is people were using this to comment on other brands, which was interesting, and other brands were using this to comment on their own brand, which is even more interesting, including a direct rival to EA. And people using it to comment on what's happening in the news, politics. Some of those things were not great, and you can need to kind of figure out how to kind of stop those happening. But most of them are really, really very funny. People are witty, and they're kind of wittier than us, I think we found. But within minutes of us launching this way back in September, this was kind of very much a kind of trending topic on Tumblr. It's kind of made for Tumblr in a way, and we were just only starting to scratch the surface of what people were kind of going to go on to do with this. So this couple of favourites of ours. So people really wanted to make this their own and to kind of use it to do things which meant a lot to them, right? So they kind of, once they got past the kind of team they loved and the player they rated and the players they hated, this fan wrote out the whole of Disney's Frozen using the GIF rater, and I think really impressively using our Frozen background, which we provided, not accidentally for that reason. So that's dedication. Not exactly what we intended, but great for Madden, great for the fan, great for people on the web, great for Frozen fans. At the other end of the spectrum, this is kind of like, not even just in the digital world this was happening. This is something that someone made, which is kind of like an analog GIF rater, to talk about NFL's partnership with McDonald's with the Happy Meal toys. So, and you can see also on the screen, at least to read out the things. What I love though is the way that, to kind of Drew's comments about kind of filtering and kind of like, not being a dick, they've self-filtered themselves on the right by the accidental, deliberate misspelling of the F word to get through their own kind of like analog filters, which I think is really cool. So, people were having fun with it in different ways that weren't even really just to do with our tool. It became part of kind of culture and part of that kind of community. And then some people spent more time doing more impressive things or less impressive, if you can decide. This fan made a video, which we'll play only a short extract from. So that's a 20-second extract from a 3-minute video, which is on YouTube if you want to see it. And there were versions of tracks, parody tracks by Iron Maiden, by lots of the kind of poppy type things, which I don't know much about. But the cool thing was people finding new ways to use the GIF rater that weren't kind of anything we'd imagined, and they were spurring other people into doing even more imaginative things. So we kind of like took the pin out of the grenade, but then just watched what happened. So to wrap a bit, so we started here, I think, and with this kind of notion that as storytellers in the digital age, our job is to somehow connect users with the magic, right? I think that's a kind of starting point for our team, but also for the way that Drew's team and our team work together. And that for us, that means starting with insights about people, what they want, what they need, what they miss, what they don't know they don't want, or they don't have yet, and giving them that through the products and the services and the experiences that we kind of create for them as technology kind of companies, but also as brands and as agencies. And we, it's Drew and I are thinking about twist on that. If you kind of go from use the magic, data to the idea, think about data-driven storytelling. Maybe there's a kind of twist on the user's magic thing, which is the idea that people in a way provide the data, right? So if you understand what they do and you understand how they behave and how they interact and when they interact and what kinds of devices, what kinds of contexts, what they're looking for, and you feed that into an idea. And use it not just to develop the idea, but to actually power the idea, as you saw from some of the stuff Drew showed, that enabled us to be very, very, very contextual and relevant to what was happening in real life as we sell something in real time. And then finally, if you also use data to kind of to improve the idea, right? To kind of the circle of kind of iteration and improvement and morphine as you kind of move on from what you started with to what you kind of where you ended up with. And I think our final, I guess, supposition, contention maybe, is that data-driven storytelling, maybe it's these three things. Maybe it's a good set of three lenses to look at it. So it's not just the basis for your strategy, which is a start, or the way you measure your campaign, which is also, you know, a kind of planary type strategy thing as well. Maybe it's maybe it's the idea that the middle bit, that stories told through and using data can be powerful in themselves, and that's kind of interesting part, I think, particularly for creatives versus strategists to play with. So the way we kind of see this chart and the way we see this kind of like, you know, summary is that data can inform. And, you know, whether it's like the trends tools we showed or the analytics tools we showed, which are all like, you know, they're not kind of special issue Google things. They're available, they're freely available, and other companies obviously offer those kind of analytics tools too. Those help us generate insights about people, about what people are doing, about what people need. And again, coming back to this idea of companions, not competition. So what can you do to augment, not kind of compete with the experience that they're currently really genuinely fanatical about? That's one area. Data can power. So we can decide exactly what to provide people at any single moment in an experience. And technology can allow us to do that with a kind of high degree of like refinement around timing and around a copy, to use that word, old word. And we can use all sorts of kind of signals there, you know, context, external events, the weather, what's on TV, location, and so on. Team fortunes in sports events. And then finally, you know, data can prove, and I think this is probably a more traditional area for kind of data and data as a kind of prop for storytelling. It can help prove that something works, which is the traditional kind of realm of the planner, but it can also be used during an experience to improve what you're making. So in a kind of 16-week NFL season, it's amazing to see how much the data we're getting from the experience in terms of what's working, what's not working, is being used to kind of improve not just the copy, but the way we've kind of honed the experience, so it's kind of ultra usable and ultra shareable, so we can keep people interested over what is a long period. But that long period is a good window for us. So the most important slide, of course, of all, is the last slide. The next time that we're doing a kind of special war room type version of this for a game is actually this Sunday. So as Drew says, this is pretty much on autopilot for most games. Certain games where there's a particular kind of like higher interest nationally, there's a bit more of a kind of war room focus on this. And there are copywriters in the agency, and there are kind of custom-made GIFs that are made to do with moments in the game that are served into ads. So if you were interested this Sunday, I think there's a team that's somewhere around here called the New England Patriots, playing another team somewhere called Indianapolis Colts. And that if you're watching on the kind of sports sites and, you know, CBS, the kind of game trackers and things like that, you'll see hopefully real-time versions of what's happening in the game rendered in GIFs and brought to you hopefully pretty quickly. And if you want to find out more about the project or other projects that Drew's team and my team have worked on, you can go to this site. Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions? Yeah. Not in this particular one. So Heat was the agency, the creative agency. So we partnered with the Wyden crew in Portland on the previous project we did, again with Bro and Drew, around Nike in the summer. So they're very, very much involved. Heat, very, very much involved. Very much a kind of, there are issues and challenges with having all these different types of creative people together. But we've done it a few times now, and we're kind of getting better at work, knowing what the problems are going to be, talking about them earlier. It was there. The idea of rivalries was Heat's idea. So we kind of riffed off that. Really close. I mean, we're always hesitant to say yes to the question like that, but what's interesting if you look at the previous case study and project we did with Nike which was at scale, which is the World Cup, around the World Cup. Very different creative. So we had the same real-time serving of those pieces of advertising, but we pushed this a little bit further with all the kind of learnings from that project to make the creative side of it more, which I think is in some ways is actually the really hard bit. So that works at scale. Whereas if you look at the Nike project and all of that's on the Art Copy and Code website, you can see there are far fewer pieces of advertising, far fewer options, much heavier kind of build and investment of resource and time to make things. Whereas this, we wanted to get this to as near as possible to an automated system. Well, you'd have to ask them that question, but I think it's fair to say they were really thrilled with the level of debate and discussion, and particularly as Drew said, in the first couple of weeks, people have had that period where they've been starved of NFL and couldn't wait to get back into the kind of banter type mode. So this was hugely popular at that point at that part of the season, and which suited Madden because that's when most of their games get sold. Right, so there was a kind of, it was a kind of nice confluence, but they were, and they remain, I think, very happy with the way it has kind of extended throughout the season. So, it's a middle bit of the season, which is a bit less important. And I think towards the end of the season, next couple of weeks around holiday, you'll see a bit more of a spike back of that. So, they're definitely talking about using this kind of format, at least, / back end / idea for other of their titles. So that would indicate they're kind of relatively happy.
Can I add too?
Sure.
I remember one thing we spoke to them about is they've been looking for a long time for a way to take all of the massive amount of resource that they put into product development and to turn that into, utilize that much more effectively in terms of marketing. That is not to say just generate a video and put it on TV or even put it on YouTube, but how can we sort of merge those two efforts? And so this was that for them. And now this is kind of, to use the word platform, a platform for them to be able to do this sort of thing with any type of content that they're generating.
Do you want to take that?
Well, no one invites me to the war room, but not a lot. The tool itself is hugely capable. I mean, and frankly, they're just using basically what the users are doing. So very simple. And I want to say there's 2 copywriters in the room and the client.
I mean, there's war rooms and there's war rooms. So, I mean, been in a few. Certainly, the first few games, it was more of a kind of party meets a war room. So everyone in the agency was there. It was at Heat. The war room was at Heat in San Francisco, and there were the people doing the work. There were the 2 writers. There was a creative director. There was a kind of technical director. But everyone came, right? So that was difficult to actually see what the war room consisted of. Later on, those people all go off and do other things, and it's basically down to that smaller team. So I think again, our ambition with EA here was to not create something that was massively resource intensive. Otherwise, it's not going to be sustainable for 16 weeks. So we were, Google, we were very much involved in the war room to start with, but then we kind of handed over the kind of controls to them, and they don't need us anymore. So probably the short answer is smaller than you think. It's a stupid overused phrase.
The last war room I saw was one of the copywriters in a bar watching the TV and typing his laptop. So it can be done very low.
Yeah. Yeah. Any more questions before we wrap? Yes.
How do you see this approach being implemented? And I guess less, an ad agency that isn't necessarily Google intent there, but do you see it through art director, copywriter, developer team? Do you see art tactical coding principles in your own stuff and not having to person?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, Drew, chime in too. I don't think there's anything in this particular case that any agency couldn't do without Google. It's just, I mean, there's a little bit where we're trying some kind of new capabilities with some of our ads products that we can have added to this. But really, the fundamental, the really hard bit, which is the creative side of stuff, it's not really that's not really because it's Google. I mean, we didn't really. It's probably more Drew's team, to be honest. You need a good digital production agency, but you can't use them because we use them. But that, you need people who understand how the web works. I mean, once you understand, how what memes are, how they spread, what GIFs, and how to make them, like Drew said at the beginning, not cheesy but epic and cool. So you don't immediately start a fire which you can't put out on, hour one where people are, oh my god, I wish we thought of filtering, like pull it down. So you have to understand how the web works, and how people use mobile devices, and how people go back to my very first slide, how people actually watch sport. In this case, and anyone could do this. I mean, I think it's hard at times, but it's not. There's no special source. Anything else? Yeah.
How do you guys use agencies to collaborate with?
So we usually there's no real science or scientific answer. We tend towards what we call loosely, lazily, possibly iconic brands. So, big, successful, confident brands who are going to be happy to take a few risks with us. You've got good people, on the digital side who are already trying to do interesting, adventurous things that we can kind of join and kind of collaborate with. And then they inevitably have great agencies working with them because they're that kind of people. So the three-way thing is really important, that it needs to work. There needs to be a collaboration that's a three-way thing. And I kind of have a dotted line between Grow and us as kind of the Google side. But the creative agency needs to be strong, which they usually are, because if it's a great brand. The brand needs to be adventurous and have great digital people and want to try something a bit different. And we'll then pile in and do whatever we can to make it work. So there's no science. We've probably done sports a bit. So it's, there's probably a little bit of a kind of, we don't want to do lots and lots of things the same. So we didn't want to do lots of luxury products after Burberry. But no, there's no real cast iron template for that.
I was just wondering if
So I'll give you an example. So to partly answer your question, so clearly the Super Bowl is a big moment in the world of advertising and marketing. So we're reviewing right now, have been for a while, which brands are look like they're going to do interesting things at the Super Bowl, and we'll be working in areas that we will find interesting, whether it's real-time marketing or location-specific marketing, or made for mobile video, or whatever kind of interest pots that we're thinking about, then the list gets much shorter really quickly once you look at people who are doing interesting things. And then, is there a shared appetite for adventure? Is the creative agency awesome, and can we just not wait to start working with them? They're so awesome. Are these guys available to help us because we need their help? So there's a kind of it's not scientific. I'm afraid. Thank you very much.